Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, her website taxpayer.com. Welcome back to the show, Kris.
Thank you for having us.
Kris, taking a look back at the Canadian election and what people really wanted addressed, and they've been sending you emails. What did they want to hear the politicians talk about, and what did they want solutions for?
It's one of those moments where you just shake your head, right? I don't know anybody, no matter what party they vote for or if they're partisan or not for any particular brand, who's happy with the result of this election. Everybody's super grumpy and worried. And actually, we're getting emails and some phone calls of folks saying, hey, my natural gas bill has gone up, or filling up my minivan just cost me, well over $100. Like, what the hell is going on? Isn't this part of affordability? Why weren't folks talking about affordability and things like gas taxes and stuff during the election? That's a good question. Advocacy organizations such as ourselves, we always put out content and topics and such during election campaigns. Same thing for folks who have, different priorities, still put out their stuff. And it depends on who gets picked up. But unfortunately, affordability was largely missed during the election. And so this is where we're sounding the alarm bell and trying to give people some hope at the same time, saying, this didn't end at the ballot box. It's up to us. It's our responsibility now more than ever to stay on top of these MPs. At their local riding level, get to know their administrative assistant, get to know their staff, get to know them. You phone them, like weekly. You email them weekly about the topics that you're concerned about. And if it's something like gas taxes or carbon taxes, tell them how much you're paying. Tell them that you can't afford it. Tell them that it's causing your grocery bill to go up. This is where we're really hearing from folks now saying, why weren't, issues of content actually discussed during the election?
I know officially Statistics Canada is saying food inflation 4% maybe, whereas in reality it's more like 9 or 10%. Mm-hmm. And a big part of that, of course, is the cost of fuel for farmers, because although a farmer can use purple gasoline that doesn't have a road tax on it, that doesn't matter because most equipment uses diesel, or if he's drying grain, natural gas. They plan to put high carbon taxes on that as well. That's going to affect the price of food, is it not?
It absolutely does. Now, to be clear, yes, there are other issues. There's some supply chain problems with different types of food. We had droughts in different parts of Canada and North America that affected, in some cases, costs of meat, for example. But absolutely, carbon taxes play a big role when it comes to this issue. And so it's the grain drying. And for folks who don't know, farmers use mostly natural gas, in some cases propane even, to dry grains and their products that they bring in, their crops they bring in off the fields. That is subject to carbon taxes. Okay? And so that will, of course, make, in their own way, some groceries cost more. And so it can be the actual grains themselves. So, the price is attached to that in some way. And then also it's the trucking. This is a big element here. The trucking of getting it from the farm to, your plate, as they say, to the store. That has carbon taxes on the diesel. The grocery stores themselves typically will heat and cool using natural gas. They, of course, are not exempt from the carbon tax. And even locomotive diesel, think of how much stuff that we use that is shipped around even British Columbia here on railways. You see it all the time. It still happens all the time. They get nailed with the carbon tax here in BC too on locomotive diesel. So when they increase the cost of the carbon taxes, so the first carbon tax and the second carbon tax here in BC, usually that will, of course, have a knock-on effect on the things you buy.
Now, of course, what they want you to do is buy an electric car so you don't pay the gasoline carbon tax. Where is the electricity for that car going to come from, and how much is that going to cost us? Because I've seen interview after interview that says we're going to have to increase our electrical grid and generation capacity by 100%. In other words, double it. I don't see any action on that happening.
Great question. I've seen the same stats, basically, and these are like top energy analysts. You know, they want more juice to the system. They're not naysayers. They're saying things just like that. They're saying if everybody right now, if Santa magically brought them an electric car and they were able to use it tomorrow morning and they plugged in, that our grid in North America, the different overlapping grids, that we don't have the juice. And again, these are people who want expansion. These are sometimes people who really like things like electric vehicles. We don't have the power right now. And so if we want to start working towards that, we got to figure that out. And we have to figure out how to do it affordably, because a lot of people already have struggle paying their electricity bill. So just imagine how much it's going to cost them now if we're always charging all of our vehicles. It's a major problem to figure out. And what's a real head scratcher here, like a major one, is some of our friends on the other side of the fence, so to speak, who are big keeners on leave all oil and gas in the ground. We need to stop right now, switch it off, switch to electric, as if it's very simple. They are often, not always, but they're often huge opponents of nuclear power, even like modular, like brand new ways of doing it, like modular nuclear power that you can do city to city, that the provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan are analyzing right now. They don't like that. And they also don't like big hydroelectric dams either. They're usually the folks who are protesting things like Site C. And now, whether or not Site C actually has engineering issues, we'll leave that to the experts. But typically, just in their rhetoric, they're opposed to big power plants delivering needed electricity. So it's a real head scratcher of these folks who don't want oil and gas. Okay, fine. They don't want nuclear. Okay. They also don't want hydroelectricity. Where do they want the energy to come from? Because it can't come right now from solar and wind. Like, we can't. We don't have.
Well, take a look at Europe that's having an energy crisis because their wind farms were becalmed and they didn't have the coal and natural gas to fire up their old plants, which they're dismantling anyway. They plan not to have any up and running within a few years.
Yes, we can't force things to be windy. We can't cause wind to occur. And in some cases, solar is too intensive on the investment, on how much money they're putting in to actually build the solar farms. And there's also some environmental concerns around that too. How much green space are you actually covering? How much does it cost to actually produce these things, both in real money and in resources, and or shipping it from China or here in North America? Like, everything has a cost. But having immediate sources of affordable power, including electricity, is essential for our prosperity and growth. And so for folks who, for some reason, think that things such as oil and gas, or let's not even say it's oil and gas, let's just say affordable, immediate, dependable power, okay, no matter how it comes from, where it comes from. Imagining that this is somehow rich corporate barons making money off of this, rather than turning the lens around and looking at what role affordable, dependable energy and power plays in our lives, is crazy. Because look around you. If you're out for a walk with the dog right now, you've got a smartphone, you're listening to this podcast, it's in your pocket. Think of all the stuff that went into making that actual smartphone. If you're at your desk listening to this, look around you. Pretty much everything around you has either been made directly from oil, or it's used oil and gas to be created, or it's been shipped to you that way. Possibly all three. Now, farming, food, like, we need dependable, immediate, affordable forms of energy in order to produce food, to feed people, and to clean our water. This is essential. So we really hope that the adults in the room focus on what we need to do in order to have the cleanest possible, but nothing's perfect, cleanest possible sources of affordable, dependable, constant energy and power. Because we can't go back. Like, we're not going to be going back to Little House on the Prairie times. We certainly hope that people aren't actually suggesting that we do that.
Now, when we talked about modular nuclear reactors, if you use helium as a coolant, the thing is, if it leaks, it's not radioactive.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, because it doesn't have the extra electrons that become radioactive.
Wow, I did not know.
Yeah, so it becomes safer.
You learn something new every day. I did not know that.
But of course, helium's a natural resource that we're wasting in things like party balloons when it's needed for scientific research and medical procedures and so on.
And see, if we put more of our efforts into developing things like that, we'll do better for it. And I'll give you an example. So even say something like getting more natural gas out of, our environment here in North America using good labor practices, good treaty negotiations, environmental practices, all of that. It's much cleaner burning than most other forms of energy on the world, really. It's one of the main reasons why actually the United States reduced its emissions. Very few people talk about that. How did they reduce their emissions? Well, because they largely massive switch to natural gas that they were producing themselves. If we started doing that in other parts of the world, such as India, that does several things. It could reduce emissions dramatically because 250 million people in India are still relying on dried animal dung and wood burning every single day to meet their basic heating and cooking needs. So if we get them natural gas here from Canada, it's win-win-win. They get to reduce their emissions. That helps the environment. It also dramatically improves their lives because their indoor air pollution drops. It frees up the women and children in those rural parts of India from gathering fuel every single day, which they have to do every single day right now. On our side of things, it employs people in really good, high-paying jobs. And tax-wise, they pay high income taxes on those good jobs. Those income taxes, in turn, can develop into things like hospitals, schools, roads, all of the things that we like to use here in North America. So wisely harnessing our natural resources and considering the fact that how much we pay in income taxes, and then on royalties even, how much governments can make from it, even things like property taxes. People don't realize that pipeline companies pay property taxes to municipalities that they run through. In some cases in Burnaby, I think I was reading, the amount that was being paid just for the Kinder Morgan pipeline, now Trans Mountain, I think it covered their garbage collection. It was a crazy amount of money. That was just for a property tax. So we really need to start thinking about this more holistically instead of just fighting amongst ourselves.
Now, taking a look at affordability, the city of Vancouver wants to charge parking fees for every resident to park in front of your own house. I don't know. Do these parking fees cover if you park in your own driveway? I don't know.
As of right now, they don't cover if you park in your own driveway. And this is where I think it's really good we're talking about this, because they're trying to slide it in. This is the thin edge of the wedge. They're trying to slip it under the door saying, hey, this is all altruistic and who could possibly argue with this? So right now, they're proposing around $40 a year per car to park in front of a house. The person parking in the driveway or, inside the garage or carport wouldn't get dinged. So one could say, well, $40, that's not much money, who really cares? But two things on that. One, the person parking on the street is typically going to be the person who's renting the basement suite. So they're going to be the one who probably has a lower income, whereas the homeowner or the person who rents the upstairs at the higher price, they're typically the one that parks in the available driveway and or the garage. That's one. Two, they're not going to stop at $40 a year. This is just in order to get people signed on. And once they're signed on, it'll automatically go up. Three, there's a special charge that they're coming out with. I think it's about $1,000 a year for what they deem to be luxury vehicles that are newly purchased that use gasoline. So this is a way of punishing people who spend a certain amount of money on their vehicles and dared to buy a gas-powered vehicle rather than an electric vehicle. So it's a sin tax for continuing to use an internal combustion engine. So if we start doing this now, one, they're going to start increasing the cost of parking on the street no matter what you're driving very quickly. And they can easily start sliding it back to include older vehicles that were purchased more cheaply. And two, how is this going to help the environment? How is this going to reduce global climate change? How is it going to reduce emissions? It won't. It's the same way that the BC carbon tax doesn't work. When it was first introduced in 2008, they told us all sorts of things. They said it was going to be revenue neutral. They said it was going to stop at $30 a ton. They said that the money was going to go towards developing like very easily affordable and abundant alternative energies. And that emissions would go down. Like none of that is true now. Like none of it. It's not called revenue neutral. They don't even hide that fact anymore. The money goes into general revenue. Alternatives are pretty darn scanty, and emissions are going up, not down. So it's just a massive cash cow for government. And so we can see this parking tax thing and this parking fee thing turning into that very quickly. And when they combine it with their plans to build a toll wall around downtown Vancouver, because it's all part of the same plan. It's all part of their plan to somehow save planet Earth because we're acting here in Vancouver, which is weird. It's all part of their same plan. So we're opposed to it. Even though it's $40 a year, we're telling them it's not going to stop there, and it just leads to worse things.
I could see people paving over their front lawns so they can park there and not pay this tax.
Sure, and then if they're paving over their front lawns, one, they're creating emissions by paving it. So whether it's cement or asphalt, right, both of those are high-intensive emission actions, and they're paving over green life, which of course uses CO2. Like, I can easily see this happening.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims, continuing with this proposed Vancouver tax to park in front of your own home. What if I'm a contractor and I have a diesel pickup that I need for my plumbing or sidewalk installation business?
Great question. Those diesel pickups definitely clock in at over their so-called luxury amount price. So yeah, you're driving your pickup truck, you're going to get nailed with a luxury tax parked in front of your house. And folks who say take transit or take your bike, like that's just head scratching, because a tradesperson is not going to be bringing their power tools or their acetylene torches or whatever else, their wheelbarrows, whatever else they need to use on SkyTrain. Well, we sure hope they're not, or they're not going to be walking, from Burrard over to Clark with it. It's just not going to happen. So this is where we start getting frustrated with folks around City Hall who seem to treat Vancouver as if it is their own kind of Sim City computer program pet project village nestled somewhere in the Kootenays. Of, hey, couldn't you just imagine if we had a very small village and we always walked and biked and rollerbladed to things, we went between our, collective school that we're all, learning about art from, and then we pedaled down to the local organic cafe to get our things, and it's all within, say, a 3-kilometer radius. Like, that sounds really nice. Like, a lot of people would like to live like that. And some folks are able to recreate that microcosm in their own ways while living an urban lifestyle. I was car-free for like 13 years in Ottawa. I got my groceries on my bicycle. I took my bike everywhere. Not everybody can live like that. There are...
How many kids did you have then?
I was working on one. So after we had our first, I still toughed it out, but it was difficult trying to bring a baby and a load of groceries on 3 buses and a bike. So some folks do it, and it is their entire lives. Like, they work their lifestyle around how they move about. That's fine. But they're not everybody can do that. The vast majority of people have kids, they have dogs, they have a lot of stuff, they have tools, they have groceries. They need to move their stuff to do their stuff. And by doing so, they need the horseless carriage, the car. That's how they move about. And folks at Vancouver City, downtown, need to accept this, that people need to use their vehicles, and they need to quit this ideological war on the car. And they definitely have one, because I haven't checked the latest draft, but the first draft of this plan included an idea that even when they're building new housing, which we desperately need in Vancouver, that they were going to disallow a builder from having an underground parking lot. Like, outlaw it. Even if it were full of electric cars. They didn't care what fuel they were using. It was anti-car. So the last one I saw, they want two-thirds of all trips within Vancouver to be on foot or on bikes. So like I just described to you, say you've got a busy, burgeoning family. Most people can't do that. And now let's imagine, say that you're disabled and you can't walk or bike wherever you need to go. What if you're an elderly woman and you need to get to 2 different doctor's appointments and you need your vehicle? What if you're a young person and you're working shift work downtown and you don't feel safe on public transit and walking 15 blocks at night? You need your car. People are immensely complex. Our individual lives are complicated. Big government top-down solutions affect our complicated lives drastically, and they can have unintended consequences. So again, if some folks in Vancouver are able to live that kind of urban lifestyle where they're physically able and they're fit and they can bike and they can tow things around behind their bikes, like that honestly is fine. That's great. Lots of folks can do that. Most of us can't.
A thing that has you worried is internet censorship, since this show is being sent via the internet. Bills C10, Bill C36, proposed by the Liberals, would greatly censorship the internet and the content that you would find on it, or even the excuses. During the election, our network was suspended from YouTube because we talked to one particular candidate, a political candidate running for a membership in Parliament. So it doesn't matter who you talk to, they just automatically suspend you. What's the federal government going to do to people like us who criticize them?
They're going to gag us. And I'll give you an example. I know who you're talking about that you had spoken to. I've interviewed him dozens of times. He's a public figure. I'm worried if I mention his name right now that your show is going to get blocked again. So I won't. That's crazy. That you and I cannot have this conversation and put it on YouTube while me mentioning that sanctioned candidate's name for a major political party is crazy. And it should be a huge blaring warning alarm for folks as an example of what things like C10 and C36 are going to do. So C10, for folks who don't know, if I can put it very simply, it would basically put the same rules of the CRTC that they have on mainstream media, so things like, Global News or CTV National, onto all of us. And then, here's the other element. If it is deemed, quote-unquote, offensive, then it's going to be up to a CRTC bureaucrat to decide whether or not our conversation can be posted online. So it could be a conversation like this on YouTube. It could be a video that you and I are doing that's posted on Facebook. If it is deemed to be offensive, and they use that term very, very loosely because of the example that you just gave with your interview.
Well, I've been around long enough to know no matter what you say or do, somebody will be offended by it.
Sure. We have billions of people on the planet, and somebody's going to be offended. So this would enshrine what happened to your interview in law. Now, Bill C-36, where we talk about things like online harms, is also a major issue. What they're talking about doing there is extending what would be harmful, depending on your definition, to your posts on the Internet. Now, the way that they've first described it is, we need more power to combat terrible things, such as inciting terrorism, calling for hate against an identifiable group, or sharing images of child sex abuse. Okay? This is their excuse of saying we need this new big law. Here's the key. All three of those terrible things I just mentioned are already in the criminal code. They are against the law. I mean, with a capital A, against the law. In some cases, it can land you life in prison. Like lock up, throw away the key. We have almost no offenses in Canada that carry that, but one of them carries that offense. So those are already against the law. And if people see them online, they literally phone the police. So if we want to have the conversation about extending, sentencing for things like calling, for harm against an identifiable group or abusing children or something, that's different. Like, go ahead and talk about that with the Justice Minister, with the Attorney General.
But like you said, that's already illegal. So, but it's the old, if you're against this kind of law, you must be one of those. Or if you're a lawyer defending somebody, you must support murder.
Exactly. They apply odious intent.
And they also can impose giant fines with no appeal.
This is the key.
How is that within the Charter of Rights?
It's not. And it's fines on the social media platform that allowed it. So how many times do you think Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or whatever other group that, you're using as a social media conduit is going to take the quote unquote risk of posting an interview or, a rant to camera or a podcast that the censors could deem offensive? And this is key too. Michael Geist, who's a professor at Queen's, he's been just sounding the alarm on this. I encourage anybody to go look him up. Michael Geist, G-I-E-S-T, at Queen's, who's been talking about this. It would build an entire wing of bureaucracy, and this is their own words here, to monitor and police the internet. And for folks who are sitting there thinking, oh, well, I really like Justin Trudeau, I agree with his vision of Canada, what do I care if the government, at the flavor that it is right now, is deciding whether or not people can say things on the internet because I've got nothing to hide, quote unquote. Okay. How would you feel about Stephen Harper making the same decisions? No? If that makes you squeamish and you don't want him policing your speech online, then folks, we all need to stand up against this. We have to oppose Bill C-10 and we have to oppose Bill C-36 because it is online censorship. And even right now it's starting to attract international media attention, and analysts are saying that this is some of the heaviest-handed internet restrictions and free speech restrictions in the world. And it's going to happen here in Canada unless we do something about it. C-10 was so problematic that the Senate, what other people would refer to as liberal, but it's I forget what they call it, the Independent Liberal Caucus of Senators, that's some other word they use now, the Senate held it up. Usually they just sleepily rubber stamp everything that goes through that chamber. But in this case, they actually did sober up and give sober second thought. And they put the brakes on it before the election. But now that Trudeau is in there, and it's going to be the NDP from the looks of it in the driver's seat, propping up the minority, we unfortunately haven't heard good things from the NDP on this. And there's a lot of reasons why they should be opposed to it, because this will hit left-wing activists as soon as a right-wing government is in power, and vice versa. So all of your listeners from all parts of the spectrum, if they want to be able to have free speech in Canada and express themselves online, they got to call their MP.
Kris, if people are interested in the issues we've talked about, where can they go?
We would love to hear from them. We've got a website. It's called taxpayer.com. And for folks who don't know, we are a grassroots organization. We started 30 years ago. We rely on small donations from Canadians. We aren't a charity, but we are a not-for-profit. We're non-biased. We can't have any memberships in political parties, but we have fundamentals. We want lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government. And that's why we're pushing so hard on the censorship thing, because if we can't speak up, none of us can hold our rulers to account. We have to be able to have accountable government. So if they go to our website, taxpayer.com, they can sign petitions about things they care about. And what's really cool is we have a toolkit there on how to push back, how to, as they say, as the kids say, how to speak truth to power, how to contact your MLA, how to phone your MP, how to write a really good but firm email. And you can click on it and it'll help you.
Kris, thank you so much for being on the Goddard Report.
Thank you for caring.
My guest has been Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. If you have questions for Kris, we'll ask that question for you if you send it to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.